sideways, and I did it last time like this, and it was fine, I
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. I have this desire to talk to you like
think. Because what happens if I go like this, then you see me vertically,
yeah,
but you see me, and I think they want a horizontal frame. So
gotcha.
let's
Okay.
hopefully this will work. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I confess I haven't watched these, so I haven't seen yours before, so I know nothing about what's happening in your life.
That's I think that's probably the best approach. You know, 'cause-
Where
but
are you? Where are you in the world?
I'm in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan. Have you ever been this part of
No,
the world?
no, never happened.
It's no, it's a great country. It's desert. It's Middle East,
Yeah,
so it's starting to get really warm.
but the birds are
Which
chirping.
there's some birds, and it's sort of the lights starting to go down a bit.
You have a visitor back there. Yeah.
Oh, it's my wife. Hi.
The baby can hear you.
Oh, really? Should I move? Okay, Alec. Let me
Yeah, no
see
problem.
if I can. Yeah, let's change locations if that's all right.
The table, just so it's
Maybe. Yeah, maybe I can do it here. Are we recording?
We are. But
Okay.
they can edit this out. Well, I kind of love it, but yeah.
Wait, I forgot my notebook with the questions. Hold on, Alec. I'll be right back. Hey, sorry.
No problem.
So this is we have a 1-year-old,
Oh my God.
and it's around bedtime right now, so we just put her down, and yeah, so it's like
We could whisper.
we're no, now we're good. Now we're good. But your kids are older, right? You have two, right?
I have two, yeah, 17 and 13, almost 14.
Oh, 17. I didn't realize. Wow.
I know.
Uh,
Yeah, it came quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, this is not one of my questions, but I do wonder. So 17, and that's sort of around the time that probably they want more independence, and now they're locked in with dad and mom.
Yeah.
Right. So how's that working out?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. I mean, it's I mean, the whole thing about teenagers, everyone talked about it, and especially teen girls, people said, that's like a very hard time. And I thought, like, well, not my little angel.
Yeah.
But I mean, all of teenagerdom has been very challenging. And then this just like doubles down on the problems. So yeah, it's challenging.
Wow. So I should we should keep this conversation going as my daughter, because I see it as an angel, I cannot even imagine like she being,
I know. And the whole dad, I mean, and my daughter was like the daddy's girl and all of that. So it's
Is she into what you do? Like, is she into your work? Is she into
No. She's and forever she's not been. She has more of like a business mindset.
Right.
Yeah, and which is great. And so she's interested in like the larger sort of economics of the art world and photography and all that stuff potentially, but not so much doing it, which is like totally great.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And how's the lockdown situation over there? I lost track. So there's some states that basically is back to normal, and others. I mean, what's happening there?
It's just a complete shit show. It's so chaotic because Trump sort of left it to the states. To deal with, and so every state is trying to navigate their own strategy, except that then there's this external force of like Trump saying, let's open everything up, or whatever it is. So in Minnesota, where I live, we were keeping our numbers really low. Like Minnesota is sort of it's like, it has Scandinavian roots, and so we're like pretty good at following.
Like, right.
But now the numbers are going up, and simultaneous to that, we're sort of like slowly opening things up. So it's not a good situation.
Right. So
But
the numbers might spike up. Yeah.
They might spike up. It's troubling, but I mean, I'm super lucky to live in a house with a yard and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not crowded in. And
yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't. Are you one of these prepper types? You don't strike me as one.
I'm so not a prepper. No, I'm not. And even when everything went down, I was like, I mean, you probably have a much better sensibility than I do, but I'm like a class, like this, everything's going to be fine, because in America, it's like, oh, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Like, we'll take care of it. And so suddenly it's like, oh, wow, we really are out of toilet paper. What do we do?
Wow.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating how out of touch we are with death, and also like there's despair, but we're pretty good at like shoving it into the corner.
Yeah. Well, that kind of, it's a nice way to go into my first question that I had, Alec. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the future and ask you about your sense of
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But obviously, so I was just reading, I don't know if you saw this article maybe 2-3 days ago in the New York Times about how museums are starting to approach, they're starting to collect artifacts and works from people sort of as a response to this period,
Okay. No, I didn't see that.
Did you read? Yeah. Just sort of like, they're starting to ask the question of how is this period going to be remembered, in the arts, so you're into that scene, into that world, like, I don't know if you understand it or not, but you're certainly in it, so I was curious how you sort of see this being remembered photographically, like, is there, if you had a crystal ball and you could go like 20 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
is there an image that you have seen, or a body of work, or is there sort of a visual approach that to you sort of stands and transcends the sort of the daily sort of reacting to things? You know what I mean? It's a kind of a vague and maybe not too clear question, but
yeah, no, it's interesting. I think like most people, I've been reluctant to do a lot of future prediction because it's just so unclear. But it's interesting to think about, and the thing I most think about is how technologically we're going to be changing from this, so that here you and I are talking. Of course, we've always had this ability to talk to each other, but there's no doubt that the whole world of like digital communication is like going through some sort of transition. And so I feel like, kind of related to that, all of these sort of like Zoom performances and dances and events and DJ parties and all of that stuff, I think that will be the kind of marker, or one big markers of this time, less so than the documents of the sort of photographic or video documents of, people on ventilators and that kind of thing. I think more about this collective response, maybe in part because of the sort of difficulty of visualizing what this is.
Yeah.
You know,
Did you see the new Vanity Fair cover that was shot via Zoom?
no, who did it?
I forget the name.
I saw that I saw Chris Anderson did something.
Did he
He
on
photographed
Zoom?
Yeah, for New York Magazine via Zoom.
Okay, I didn't know
Or
about that.
he directed someone.
I guess so. Yeah. So the new Vanity Fair cover, it's a celebrity that I don't know their name either, but it's sort of the same idea of the photographer directing. So I guess that's the way sort of things are going, or like how, I mean,
yeah.
how do you see connecting to your sort of subjects, you know, like going forward?
Right.
Or like the idea of the road trip, you know, something that you're kind of, you know, known for.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is that I feel like my work is all about distance. So I think in a pre-pandemic era, the idea of like directing someone from behind a screen, like I could imagine doing that. But somehow like doing it in this era it feels more like a gimmick or something to me. Not that I'm against anyone doing it, but I have a harder time. I am totally lost in terms of that stuff and what it means for my own work. I don't have a good answer. I mean, I don't know about you. I did an assignment a couple weeks ago in a different city, and that like felt so good. Just to be a photographer again, to be out in the world engaging. There's hugely problematic with the masks and fewer people out and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I just sort of envisioned.
Were you photographing people, Alec?
Yeah, I was photographing people. Yeah.
And did any of these sort of, I mean, did it sort of have an impact in your approach at all, or you were just business as usual, but just with a mask and maybe more, you know, not as close? I mean, or did that sort of play part in
well, it wasn't. I mean, the idea of the assignment was I was photographing this neighborhood in Chicago where the average life expectancy is 90, and another neighborhood where the average is 60, right? So it's very rich neighborhood, a very poor neighborhood. And to me, like that contrast is always a problem because the rich people are always behind walls and always impossible to access. And so it was that times 10 because you literally like could not access their buildings. And then the poor people were still out and about, but wearing masks. And then I had to confront the issue of the mask. So it was kind of the same old battle, but just on steroids, I guess. And I don't know. I mean, I you know, the mask problem to me reminds me of the beginning of the cell phone problem. Like suddenly everyone had a freaking cell phone in a picture.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
But I did on that trip. I thought, well, this really is a problem for me doing my work, the kind of road trip work, which is really just wandering, not having such an agenda, following one thing to the next. It's just so hard to have that kind of serendipity in a lockdown situation. So I'm not even trying.
Yeah. No, it's hard. I mean, I mean, how do you go about, I mean, when you say you're not even trying, you're trying to sort of reinvent the road trip. Is that what you mean? Or
anything like that, right? I mean, basically what I'm doing is I've done little goofy experiments that aren't terrifically meaningful, but they're like little sketches, and that's the kind of thing I would do anyway in a sort of down. I'm doing that, and then I'm doing writing. That's been my creative outlet.
What are you writing?
Well, fundamentally, I've been in this letter exchange, this correspondence with this guy in prison, and
that was my last question, but
Oh, that was
let's
your
go
last
for it.
question.
Let's
Okay,
go
yeah.
for it. No, let's go for it. Let's go
Yeah.
for it because I'm so curious. I heard about this actually.
Okay, yeah.
But I just heard a little bit, and I wanted to ask you like to expand on it, and like what was the motivation, and what's this about?
Well, he wrote me totally out of the blue last year, and he's a prisoner in Minnesota where I live, and
Yeah.
basically, I mean the longer story of it is that he was in the kind of the big prison here, and they had a lot of resources. They had a library, they had art supplies, an art program, and all that. Then he got transferred to this really crappy prison where he just gets a little cubicle. He doesn't have art materials. He's not allowed books.
Did he get into trouble and that's why he got transferred?
He got into trouble, and it's a really long story.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why he was transferred. And thus he's like super hungry for creative engagement and creative dialogue. So he just I sent letters out to local artists and writers and people. I'm not sure who all he contacted. And he contacted me, and I was slow to respond. But around the end of last year, I replied, and we started this dialogue, which then, once lockdown happened, it like took on all this added meaning.
Totally.
Because here's a guy, I mean, since 2003, he's been in prison and dealing with all of these constraints. So that's been super interesting. And it's been an opportunity to talk with him about photography itself, because one of the things he said when he first contacted me is that, because he's not a photographer, he's a writer and painter, but he uses photographs so much, he said, as his source material. And just kind of thinking how photographs exist for him, it's been super interesting. Yeah.
And what did he say about that? Actually, I'm curious. Like, in what form did they exist for him, given his situation?
Yeah. So I told him about this event that I did a couple of years ago in the UK. And have you ever heard of desert island discs? Have you ever heard of this? Okay, so everyone in the UK knows this term. I'd never heard of it, but it's a radio show that's gone on for like 70 years or something.
Yeah.
BBC. And they invite people to come in and talk about the 8 recordings they would bring to a desert island. Okay. So then someone did this with photography, and this kind of live event. So what are the 8 photographs that you would bring to a desert island? And so I did this, and I talked about what they would be. And of course, in real life, they would be 8 photographs of my family or whatever, but that's not very interesting to talk about. So I made a list, and I told this guy Fausto, I told him that story, and I said, well, what would be the 8 photographs that you would have? And he listed them, and they were they weren't real photographs, but they were like photographs in his imagination, and so vivid and so detailed. And really just I think that his imagination is much more vast because of his incarceration. So that was quite interesting. And then I did something else with him where I said, I sent him some pictures, not my own pictures, just some pictures for him to reflect on. And
like what sort?
Just like random snapshots, really, just that I found. And at first he had a really hard time connecting with them, because he wants to connect his own life, essentially, in his own experience. And so, for example, I asked him, is there a place you want to travel when you get out? And he said, I don't even let my brain go there. I don't think about travel. So his imagined photographs would often be his aunt's farm that he experienced as a child, but he would
a memory from
a memory of it. Yeah.
Right.
But then he would actually fill it in. He said, in the foreground would be my aunt, and in the background would be such and such building. Like he like visually structured the picture in his brain.
Yeah.
And I just think, because I don't know about for you, but for me, photographs, like I'm looking at them all the time, but mostly they exist in my imaginations. Like some photograph I saw by, who would, like, just generically, we could say some Robert Frank picture that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I open up that book, every week and revisit that photograph. It just exists as this like springboard to imagine things. And that's kind of how they're important for me. Like the news photograph can have impact, boom, like at that moment. But I'm more interested in that residual effect of the memory and like I was just watching a movie in which they referenced the Abu Ghraib pictures, and
Yeah.
the way that those are they are a memory now,
Yeah. And they become part of culture and history, and they really become ingrained. So you do a lot of interviews, and you're very, very generous, Alec, with your time and the way that you work, and and I mean, I should plug in the Magnum online course too, because I mean, it's such an amazing window into really just like how you go about doing your craft. So it's an amazing, so I was thinking, what can I ask you about the way you do that you didn't already sort of talk about it on, but I did read, there was this really great interview that really resonated, where you speak about how you deal with failures and how you get over them, etc. And there was this passage that sort of stuck with me that I didn't quite understand, and I want to ask you more about it for you to expand a little bit. And it was the part where you say that there's this sort of battle between who we think we want to be and who we really are. Do you remember saying something like that?
No, but it's fine. Sounds like me. Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, it was obviously in the context of, I guess, being a photographer, and but I was hoping that you would talk a little bit more about this battle and what that means for you in particular. Is it and I also, I've read, and you spoke about how you sort of compartmentalize your your work and your life, and so this sort of balancing act between all of these forces, but in particular this like, who do you think you want to be, and
right,
and at this stage in in our lives, in our careers, is that still a battle for you, and how does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Well, I'll talk about the thing that's kind of on my mind at the moment, which is related. I sent out that thing just amongst our little Magnum group. Magnum group. That and because so I think it's funny because that Paolo published that piece, and it was gorgeous piece on his kids, and my mom texts me like and is like, wow, this reminds me of you, and like, I hope you're photographing your and then I say no, and she's like, basically like, well, you're gonna regret it, it's like jabbing the knife in, and that's a really sore spot, because I mean, first of all, now, like, as we started, my daughter's 17, and so like I have not documented her life, and I missed, I have cell phone pictures or whatever, but I didn't do that. I missed that. There's no redoing it. And a while back, someone said I should photograph my son every month, starting from when he's 12 years old, because the change is so vast, and that's happened now, and I didn't do that. And I miss those opportunities, and it's crazy because I do value that kind of photography so much. I love personal photography, almost more than anything. And so the fact that I haven't done it is really grating. But at the same time, I have tried in the past, and it never feels right. It's just not me. In the same way that I've tried doing like real reportage, and I feel fake doing that too. So it's that battle, but I would really love to be, like a family photographer, of, and like Larry Sultan is a god to me.
Right. But I mean, that doesn't mean that you're a bad father. No, I mean, it's, because I mean, it sounds like for you, it's very important to separate, that family time, that, there's this sort of, and I also, I've read that, and you've spoken about how for you taking on a project is something that takes, it's a big calculation, that, you really go in, it's a multi-year thing, and that, it's that it's, you really think about pictures in a project rather than like snapshots that maybe you will put together later, so there's a calculation, there's a method, but
I'm not proud of that. Like, that's just the way I work. Like, I really respect photographers that are fluidly photograph their whole life and it's all one big work.
Yeah. I'm not like that either, Alec. I can't, no, not at all. I mean, I have been forcing maybe it's not the right word, but trying to be more engaged in terms of taking pictures of my daughter and of my family, not necessarily because of this period, but in general. Yeah. But it doesn't sort of come out of, I need to remind myself, and for me, it really, I mean, to a lesser degree, maybe it's, I need to sort of, it's like going to work, I need to put a suit on or the equivalent, and I need to like, kind of go to work, and yeah, I'm not the kind of guy that carries a camera everywhere and finds amazing pictures on every corner, so I relate in that sense.
I do think, I mean, this subject of failure to me is so, that it's like one of my favorite things to reflect on. And I think this pandemic period has been interesting for me because I have had these, like very small potatoes failures. Like, they're pretty inconsequential, but I tried photographing with binoculars. I tried making these sculptures and photographing them. And it's like, but allowing myself to do those little things and even put them out there, but have it not really. Yeah. I think that's good.
But how do you know already they're failures? I mean, how do you make that decision? And can that maybe in like 10 years, suddenly you find a box with those negatives and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think failure is a strong word, but it's just like, that it's so much for me and not for other. There would be no reason for anyone else to look at it, I guess. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what's your relationship with failure? If I can turn the tables. I mean, do you? Yeah.
It sucks. I mean, it's,
I mean, photography itself is so full of failure, right? So it's like, you're always missing the picture. But do you feel like larger projects fail occasionally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's it's a weird, and I don't know, if you've ever been in this sort of situation, but you know, when you feel it's a failure, but other people don't see it as such a failure the way you see it, and it's like, okay, you know, and you know, some people even like it, you know, but I mean, what I struggle with is sort of you know, sort of finding new ways to do my work that don't feel repetitive, you know. And I think in this sort of, you know, the work that I do, which a lot of times it's based on you know, reacting to news events, or you know, these news events, after a while they have this cyclical kind of nature, you know, even in different countries, that they just start looking the same, and that's something that I struggle with, you know. And yeah, and I don't know if like I'm in the middle of a project now that has to do with you know, refugees and the impact of Corona in the lives of refugees here in Jordan.
Right.
So I'm, you know, I mean, I'm working hard. I'm trying very hard, but I'm don't know if I'm succeeding at saying anything particularly sort of inspiring or deep about their situation, other than pictures of refugees that perhaps I've done many times before. You know what I mean? And so that I see as a failure, you know, and that to me is the part that sort of keeps me up sometimes, like how to, you know, how to sort of see differently or simpler, you know, or have a simpler approach, or you know, and that to me is the part that that I guess, you know, I struggle with. But does that happen to you, by the way? Like, do you have like bodies of work or a particular sort of project that you've done that you hate it or you don't like it, and people have like gone mad over it, like, you know what I mean, or like that you don't feel?
I usually hold things back really as much as I can, so that they so that doesn't happen. Not as much that people respond to. No, I mean, I did this. I worked on a project for myself a number of years ago, and I started showing it to people, and I could just tell. You know, you can just sometimes feel like the energy that they're not responding. They'll say like, "Oh, that's really great," you know, but you can just tell.
Yeah.
And so then I kind of pulled it back, and then there was one person that was kind of more excited about it and started doing things with it, but it always made me uncomfortable, that it just wasn't there. I mean, one thing I think that's interesting in my experience in Magnum is kind of, this is especially true when you're like starting out at Magnum and you're at a meeting and people are looking at books at the back of the room, you know, like the real photographers are like, they are talking and we're in back looking at books. But we're, you know, you have to be quiet. So like someone will be like flipping through the pages of my book, and as they're turning a page, I'll just be like, oh, like, why did I put that picture in there? That's such a terrible picture. And you don't even need another person to say anything. You just know, like, oh, that's a failed picture, or and so that I've had that many times where it's just like, it just feels wrong. It's out there and it feels wrong.
It's like an inner sort of voice that
but you need you need other people's eyes sometimes to internalize it.
And do you sort of go to the same types of people when you sort of want to show your work at that stage, or it changes, or
it changes. I keep it really small because I'm quite sensitive to people's feedback, so I want to be careful about it. And I don't know, but I read somewhere I think it was just about a writer just imagining like one of his favorite writers reading a story, like going, like if I could imagine, you know, being at the AGM and having another photographer flip through my book, that like that's probably a good process to sort of put myself in that place and not even really doing it, and just that's in some ways that's all I need is just the perceived presence of someone I respect.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in that sense, I mean, you know, with this online course, I mean, you've put yourself out there, you know, for people to really sort of,
Yeah.
you know, see. And
That was terrifying, by the way. So, I mean,
I mean, I cannot even imagine. I mean, but you're a natural, man. Like you're like so kind of mellow on camera and like, you know.
oh my god, oh my god, that's so not true. No, but it can't. I mean, what's crazy about it is that it came together really quickly. Like they had the idea, let's do this thing, and which seemed disorganized, and I was just quite concerned that it was going to be a disaster, not only from my own side, but just because of lack of planning. But I have to say, it's been like the most satisfying thing because it's because people, like the response has been really good, and people feel like they got their money's worth. It's just so nice.
Yeah.
It's sort of unlike anything else I've done in that way. And that, like, that's an example. That was a real roll of the dice, and that could have been a big failure.
Yeah.
That I deeply regretted. But sometimes it is good to roll the dice. Sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it takes guts. Yeah, it takes sort of, you know, you're putting yourself out there in a way that you know, I don't know if I would have that, you know, sort of openness to just lay it all, you know,
I would love
out there.
Love to
you
see.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I would so love to see the way you work and some other people work. It'd be just fascinating. And look at it, it's like getting dark out there. We're like watching the sunset.
I know. I hope. Yeah, it's. I wish there was a way that you could see more of the view. It's actually, maybe I can raise the camera a bit because it's kind of like a nice view of Amman. I don't know.
Oh my God! Yes.
Yes, and it's a really nice night too. It's So Alec, just one more question. How are we doing on time, by the way?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know what time we started.
Okay, so I'm just gonna ask you one more question, and so it was just in a general sort of term. I mean, what's the last thing that you've learned? You know, in terms of maybe, I mean, I guess in the context of photography or in the context of your work, you know, is there, like, can you think of the last, you know, it can be big or small or you know.
Okay.
Does that make sense, this question?
Yeah.
Like,
well, let me. Yeah, I know what you're getting at. So I've been working on this new metaphor.
okay.
Let me throw this out for you, and it's related to the shooting that I did in Chicago and something else. But and this relates to lockdown and all of this. So I've been thinking about. Sorry, this is not a good straightforward answer. I just want to. Basically, I want to talk through this idea that I have, and it's related.
Okay.
But so I was making an analogy in my brain to being a photographer is like being a chef, right?
Okay.
And like a chef at a restaurant. And so now during lockdown, it's like all these chefs who lost, you know, who can't cook, who can't get their work out. And then suddenly they, you know, like you'll have a fancy restaurant that's doing carry out service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bear with me here. So I felt like when I did that job in Chicago, I felt like this, and it's really pretentious to say this, but I felt like a chef but I was doing kind of like carry-out service. The food wasn't hot. It was kind of like mashed together, not perfectly, and all of that. But then I did this other assignment here in Minnesota, and it was really a minor. I was just like one little dumb picture, but it was for a very important story, and a really good story with good writing and all that. And I thought, oh, it's like I'm a sous chef. Like I'm just like over here, like preparing some little vegetables, but it's going to be a good meal. And I thought that, like, one of the thoughts I had is that one of the things that I'm learning is that it's great to be the chef and to get this sort of like ego fulfillment of that. But I think it's also good to step back and play these other roles at times and allow for that. And so that so that you're just part of a good meal, but you're not the one responsible for it.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's about dinner time, and I love food analogies.
Dinner time.
Yeah.
I can't see.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Alec. And yeah, I agree. It's good to, to do to be a sous chef sometimes. Absolutely.
Work in the service of something else. So like to do job. I mean, that's one of the things about doing jobs that can be satisfying at times, that you're just in service of something bigger than yourself. Yeah.
And it kind of, for me, I find that sometimes it kind of forces me to engage when otherwise I would not feel like it, or I'm like, and then sometimes beautiful things happen, and you meet somebody, or the story that then you want to follow up on, and no, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Cool, man. Well, hey, this is great. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really, and say hi.
Great to connect. Okay. Same to you, Alec. Take care, man. Have a good night. Bye. See you. Bye.
Hello, and here we are again. Thanks to Alec and Moises to record the past conversation. This photographer will ask the questions for the next conversation. Jerome Sassini. And this photographer will answer. Jim Goldberg. See you soon.